Dr. Kang Min-soo walked slowly through the empty halls of the Imperial Research Center. His forearms carried data tablets filled with 30 years of careful study. Today, he would present his findings about the third planet in the Sol system to the Imperial Council. Today, he would try to save both the Empire and humanity from a terrible mistake. The humans fascinated him in ways that kept him awake during sleep cycles. On the surface, they seemed like every other primitive species the Galactic Dominion had conquered. They fought endless wars among themselves. Their technology was centuries behind even the weakest Imperial member worlds. They had not even managed to leave their own star system yet, but Min-soo had looked deeper than surface observations. He had studied their history, their psychology, their response patterns to threats. What he found made his blood run cold. The elevator carried him up through the crystalline spire toward the council chambers. Through the transparent walls, he could see the Imperial fleet yards in the distance. Hundreds of massive warships floated in perfect formation, ready to bring enlightenment to another primitive world. The sight filled him with dread instead of pride. Min-soo remembered the first time he noticed something strange about human behavior. It was during his analysis of their response to natural disasters. Most species either fled from catastrophes or were destroyed by them. Humans did neither. They ran toward the danger, they organized, they adapted. They turned disasters into opportunities to grow stronger. The Great Plague of 1347 should have ended human civilization. Instead, it led to advances in medicine and social organization. The world wars of the 20th century should have destroyed them completely. Instead, they emerged with better technology and stronger global connections. Every time something tried to kill them, they learned from it and became harder to kill. But that was not the most terrifying thing about humans. The most terrifying thing was what happened when they faced extinction. Min-soo had studied the historical records carefully. When humans believed their entire species was threatened, something changed in them. Their endless tribal conflicts stopped instantly. Their competing nations worked together with perfect coordination. Their individual selfishness vanished, replaced by a collective intelligence that seemed to operate on pure instinct. They called it unity. Min-soo called it the most dangerous evolutionary adaptation he had ever observed. The council chamber doors opened with a soft hiss. 12 species sat around the great circular table, representing every major power in the Galactic Dominion. At the head sat Counselor Park Ji-won, whose species had been the first to join the Empire voluntarily after witnessing its power. Min-soo activated his presentation display and began speaking in the formal tone required for council sessions. But inside his hearts were racing with fear. Honored counselors, I have completed my study of the species known as humans. I must strongly advise against any contact with this civilization. Murmurs of surprise rippled around the chamber. It was unusual for a xenobiologist to recommend avoiding contact. Most species were either recruited as allies or conquered as subjects. Very few were simply ignored. Counselor Park leaned forward with interest. Dr. Kang, please explain your reasoning. Our preliminary scans suggest humans are a standard primitive species. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, basic electronics. They appear to be ideal candidates for rapid integration. Min-soo brought up his first data display. It showed human population growth over the past 1,000 years, marked with major disasters and conflicts. Counselors, observe their response pattern to existential threats. Unlike every other species we have studied, humans become more dangerous when they are dying. The holographic display showed the Black Plague, volcanic eruptions, ice ages, asteroid impacts, and major wars. Each time, human population and technological advancement increased dramatically in the following centuries. They have a saying, Min-soo continued. What does not kill me makes me stronger. For most species, this is just a phrase. For humans, it appears to be a biological reality. Counselor Yim Do-hyun of the warrior caste looked skeptical. Dr. Kang, these are impressive survival statistics, but they hardly suggest military threat. Our weakest battle group could sterilize their planet in days. That is exactly the problem, Minsu replied, bringing up his most disturbing findings. Counselors, in all our conquests, we have never faced a species that treats warfare as education. Humans study their enemies during battle. They adapt in real time. Most importantly, they remember everything. The data showed human conflicts throughout history. Each war introduced new technologies, new tactics, new organizational methods. But more than that, humans seemed to learn from their enemies. They absorbed the best aspects of every culture they encountered, either through trade or conquest. I have run psychological models based on 30 years of observation, Minsu said, his voice growing more urgent. If we attack Earth, we will not be fighting a primitive species defending their homeworld. We will be fighting a species that views our invasion as the greatest learning opportunity in their history. The silence in the chamber stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Counselor Park spoke with the patient tone used for dealing with overwrought researchers. Dr. Kang, your concerns are noted. However, the Empire has successfully integrated over 200 species across 50 sectors. Humans may be unusually resilient, but they are still limited by their primitive technology and divided loyalties. Minsu felt his last hope slipping away. Counselors, I respectfully request that Earth be classified as a forbidden zone. This species should never be contacted under any circumstances. The vote was swift and unanimous. The conquest of Earth would proceed as planned. 3 days after his presentation to the Council, Dr. Kang Minsu arrived at his laboratory to find Imperial guards waiting by his door. Their black armor gleamed under the artificial lights and their weapons were clearly visible. He knew what this meant before they spoke a single word. Dr. Kang Minsu, the lead guard announced in a flat official voice. By order of the Imperial Security Division, you are restricted from accessing this facility. Your research materials have been classified beyond your current authorization level. Minsu watched helplessly as security drones flew past him into his laboratory. 30 years of careful research, thousands of hours of analysis, detailed psychological profiles of human behavior patterns, all of it disappearing behind red security seals. His life's work was being buried because it contradicted what the Empire wanted to hear. Dr. Lee So-young rushed down the corridor, her face pale with shock. She had been Minsu's research assistant for 8 years, and she understood the implications better than anyone else in the building. Professor, she whispered urgently, they are taking everything, all your files on human adaptation patterns, the psychological resilience studies, even your basic observation logs. I know, Minsu replied quietly, watching as his research station was systematically emptied. They have made their decision. Facts that contradict policy become classified secrets. Admiral Kim Ji-hoon emerged from the laboratory, carrying a data pad with the official transfer orders. His expression showed no sympathy for the scientist whose career he was ending. In his view, Minsu had become a problem that needed to be solved quickly and quietly. Dr. Kang, the Admiral announced, your theories about human danger have been reviewed by military intelligence. Our experts conclude that your isolation on this research station has led to paranoid delusions about a primitive species. Minsu felt anger rising in his chest, but he kept his voice calm and professional. Admiral, my research is based on documented historical patterns and psychological analysis. The humans have survived every extinction-level event in their planet's history. They have turned every disaster into an opportunity for advancement. Enough, Admiral Kim interrupted sharply. Your obsession with this primitive world has compromised your scientific objectivity. You are hereby transferred to Research Station Omega-7 on the Galactic Rim. Perhaps isolation from Imperial politics will restore your perspective. Dr. Lee So-young stepped forward, her voice shaking with barely controlled emotion. Sir, Dr. Kang's research methodology is sound. His predictions about species behavior have been accurate for 3 decades. Perhaps we should consider, Dr. Lee. Admiral Kim cut her off with icy politeness. Congratulations on your promotion to head of xenobiological research. Your first assignment is to prepare conquest projections for the Sol system. Timeline: complete pacification within 6 months. The words hit both scientists like physical blows. So-young had just been promoted to replace her mentor, and her first job was to plan the destruction of the species he had tried to protect. The cruel efficiency of imperial bureaucracy was breathtaking in its completeness. As security guards escorted Minsu toward the transport bay, he managed to catch So-young's attention one last time. Speaking in their shared research language, he gave her instructions that sounded like casual conversation to anyone listening. Dr. Lee remembered to document all experimental observations carefully. When working with dangerous specimens, proper records can save lives later. She nodded, understanding the hidden message. Whatever happened next, someone needed to preserve evidence of what they had discovered about human psychology. Someone needed to remember that the Empire had been warned. The transport ship that carried Minsu to the Outer Rim was cold and efficient. No windows, no comfort, no communication systems. Just a metal box designed to move unwanted problems as far away as possible. During the long journey, he had plenty of time to think about what was coming. Research Station Omega-7 sat alone in empty space, surrounded by nothing but distant stars and cosmic dust. It was the perfect prison for scientists whose discoveries embarrassed the Empire. Minsu would spend the rest of his career studying harmless phenomena, while the greatest catastrophe in Imperial history unfolded without his input. Meanwhile, back on the Imperial capital world, Admiral Kim Ji-hoon was already meeting with Fleet Admiral Cho Hyun-woo to discuss the upcoming Earth conquest. The conference room was filled with confident military officers who had never failed to break a species' will to resist. Standard protocol, Admiral Cho explained to his assembled commanders. We jump into their system with overwhelming force. Demonstration bombardment of non-essential targets. Demand immediate surrender. Most species submit within hours once they understand the futility of resistance. The tactical displays showed Earth's primitive defenses. Chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, basic radar systems. To experienced Imperial officers, it looked like every other easy conquest they had completed over the centuries. Intelligence estimates complete pacification within 4 to 6 months, Admiral Kim added. Dr. Lee's psychological profile suggests humans will fragment into competing factions once their governments collapse. Standard divide-and-conquer tactics should be highly effective. None of the officers in that room had read Dr. Kang Min-soo's original research. His warnings about human unity in the face of extinction were buried in classified files that would never see the light of day. His predictions about their adaptation speed were dismissed as the paranoid fantasies of an isolated academic. The 7th Conquest Armada began preparations immediately. 300 ships, enough firepower to glass an entire planet, the most successful military force in galactic history. They expected to be back home within a year, celebrating another victory for Imperial civilization. Dr. Lee So-young worked late into the night, preparing the psychological warfare profiles her new position required. But she also copied every file she could access, storing Minsu's research in hidden data caches. When the disaster came, someone would need proof that the Empire had known better. The massive Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, like a wall of metal and fire. 300 warships arranged themselves, in perfect battle formation, their weapon systems charging with deadly light. Admiral Cho Hyun-woo stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the primitive blue world that would soon bow before Imperial might. Begin standard first contact protocol, he ordered his communications officer. Broadcast the surrender demand on all frequencies. What happened next was unlike anything in the Admiral's 20-year career of conquest. Instead of panicked radio silence or desperate pleas for mercy, Earth's communication networks exploded with activity. Radio telescopes across the planet turned toward the Imperial fleet. Government leaders called emergency sessions. Scientists abandoned their research to stare at telescope feeds. Military commanders scrambled fighter squadrons not to attack, but to get closer looks at the alien ships. The strangest part was the tone of human communications. There was fear, yes, but it was mixed with something Admiral Cho had never encountered before during first contact. Excitement. Unknown vessels, came the first official response in surprisingly clear galactic standard. This is United Earth Defense Command. Welcome to our solar system. We have been hoping to make contact with galactic civilization for decades. General Nam Tae-hyun, the Admiral's tactical officer, stared at his sensor displays in confusion. Sir, their military forces are mobilizing, but not defensively. They are moving toward us. Why would they approach a superior force? Admiral Cho frowned as he watched the tactical screen. Human ships were indeed launching from bases across Earth, but instead of forming defensive positions around their homeworld, they were accelerating toward the Imperial fleet. Their vessels were primitive, chemical rockets, basic fusion drives, crude armor plating, but they showed no hesitation about approaching ships that could vaporize them instantly. The standard Imperial ultimatum was transmitted across all frequencies. Primitive species of the Third World, you will surrender immediately and accept integration into the Galactic Dominion. Resistance will result in the complete sterilization of your planet. You have 6 standard hours to comply. The human response came back within minutes, broadcast from their largest space station. To the representatives of the Galactic Dominion, we appreciate your offer but must respectfully decline. Earth proposes instead a peaceful exchange of technology and cultural knowledge. We believe mutual cooperation would benefit both our civilizations. Admiral Cho felt a chill run down his spine. In 2 decades of conquest, no species had ever responded to the surrender ultimatum with a counter-proposal. Most were too terrified to think clearly. Others begged for mercy or tried to bargain for the lives of their children. None had ever suggested that the mighty Imperial fleet might benefit from contact with them. Sir, his communications officer reported with obvious confusion. They are requesting permission to send diplomatic vessels to meet with us. They want to establish formal relations. Absolutely not, Admiral Cho snapped. Begin demonstration bombardment. Target their 3 largest coastal cities. Make sure the destruction is visible from space. The Imperial plasma cannons charged with deadly light and fired. 3 pillars of superheated energy lanced down through Earth's atmosphere, striking major population centers with the force of small suns. The cities vanished in expanding spheres of fire and vaporized matter, leaving perfect circular craters where millions of humans had lived seconds before. Admiral Cho expected the familiar pattern to follow: mass panic, desperate surrender offers, the complete collapse of organized resistance. Instead, something impossible happened. Within hours of the bombardment, human industrial centers across the planet began converting to military production. Factories that made civilian electronics started producing military sensors. Automobile plants began assembling armored vehicles. Shipyards designed for building cargo vessels started constructing warships. The speed was terrifying. No species in Imperial records had ever mobilized their entire civilization so quickly. Most took weeks or months to transition from peace to war. Humans managed it in less than a day. Dr. Lee So-young, monitoring the situation from her laboratory on the Imperial capital, watched the tactical feeds with growing horror. Her predecessor's warnings echoed in her mind as she observed human behavior patterns that matched no psychological profile in Imperial databases. They are not responding like conquered species, she whispered to her research assistant. They are responding like a species that has been preparing for this moment their entire evolutionary history. The first wave of human counterattacks came 72 hours after the demonstration bombardment. Crude missiles launched from hidden silos, carrying primitive nuclear warheads that barely scratched Imperial shield systems. But Admiral Cho noticed something that made his blood run cold. The missiles were equipped with advanced sensor packages that analyzed Imperial defenses during their final approach. Sir, General Nam reported, his voice tight with concern. Their second wave of missiles shows improved targeting algorithms. They have modified their weapons based on data from the first attack. Within a week, human orbital platforms were launching. Kinetic bombardment systems, simple but effective weapons that hurled dense metal projectiles at incredible speeds. The technology was primitive, but the tactical implementation showed a disturbing understanding of Imperial ship vulnerabilities. Admiral Cho stared at the tactical display, watching human vessels swarm around his fleet's outer perimeter, like predators testing their prey. These were not the panicked attacks of a desperate species. These were the calculated probes of an enemy that was learning. "How long?" he asked his intelligence officer. "From first contact to their deployment of energy shielding." 18 days, sir. They appear to have reverse-engineered our plasma technology from battle damage analysis. For the first time in his career, Admiral Cho began to doubt the timeline for conquest. Humans were not just fighting back. They were studying the Imperial fleet, learning its weaknesses, adapting their tactics in real time. What should have been a simple demonstration of superior force had become something unprecedented. A learning experience for the enemy. 2 years after the first Imperial ships arrived at Earth, Admiral Cho Hyunwoo stood in the smoking ruins of his flagship's command center. Through the shattered viewports, he could see human vessels moving through space. With a deadly grace that made his heart pound with fear, what was supposed to be a 6-month conquest had become the Empire's first prolonged war in over 1,000 years. The bridge around him told the story of an impossible conflict. Scorch marks covered the walls where human plasma bolts had penetrated. Imperial shields. Half his command crew was dead or wounded. His tactical displays flickered with damage reports from across the fleet. Ships destroyed, others limping away with critical systems failing. "Status report," he demanded, though he already knew the answer would be bad. General Nam Tae-hyun, his face marked with burns from an exploding console, consulted his remaining functional displays. "Sir, we have lost 47 ships in the last month. The humans have deployed 17 new weapon systems that were not in their arsenal when we arrived. Their tactics change faster than we can adapt to them." Admiral Cho closed his eyes and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The initial phases of the war had followed standard patterns. Imperial forces had occupied major human cities, established control zones, and begun processing civilian populations. For the first few months, it seemed like just another successful conquest, but then the humans started doing things no conquered species had ever done before. Their military forces did not collapse when their governments fell. Instead, they reorganized into smaller, more flexible units that seemed to operate with perfect coordination despite having no central command structure. When Imperial forces destroyed their major military bases, the humans simply built new ones in hidden locations. Worse yet, every battle became a learning experience for them. Human engineers would analyze wreckage from destroyed Imperial ships and somehow incorporate the technology into their own weapons within weeks. Their pilots studied Imperial flight patterns and developed counter-tactics that turned the Empire's own maneuvers against them. "Sir," came a report from the sensor station, "we are detecting another human probe squadron approaching from Sector 7. They appear to be equipped with modified Imperial plasma cannons." Admiral Cho felt sick. Those plasma cannons had been top-secret Imperial technology just 6 months ago. Now the humans were using improved versions against their creators. On his remote research station, Dr. Kang Min-soo monitored intercepted battle reports with a mixture of vindication and horror. His predictions were coming true in the worst possible way. Through encrypted communications with Dr. Lee So-young, he watched the disaster unfold exactly as his research had suggested it would. "The humans have turned the entire war into a research project," he transmitted to his former assistant. "Every attack we make teaches them something new about our technology, our tactics, our weaknesses." Dr. Lee So-young's response came through heavily coded channels to avoid Imperial sensors. "Professor, the situation is worse than your models predicted. They have weaponized their own civilian population. Every human refugee camp contains engineers analyzing captured Imperial equipment. Every surrender negotiation is actually an intelligence-gathering operation." The reports from occupied territories were the most disturbing. Imperial forces would establish control over a human city, only to discover that the local population was somehow communicating with resistance forces across the planet. Human civilians turned out to be skilled saboteurs who could disable Imperial equipment with techniques that seemed to appear overnight. The breaking point came when human forces began appearing in Imperial space itself. Somehow they had traced Imperial supply lines back to their source. Human ships, now equipped with hybrid technology that combined human engineering with captured Imperial systems, started attacking Imperial bases on the far side of the galaxy. General, Nam brought Admiral Cho the intelligence report that changed everything. Sir, the humans have made contact with species from our previous conquests. They are offering liberation in exchange for military alliance. Admiral Cho stared at the data in disbelief. How is that possible? Those species were pacified decades ago. The humans have shared advanced communication technology with them. They are teaching conquered species how to fight back using our own weapons against us. Across the galaxy, the impossible was happening. Species that had been peacefully integrated into the Empire for generations were suddenly rising up in coordinated rebellions. They used human-designed tactics and human-improved versions of Imperial technology. The Empire's greatest strength, its vast size and numerous subject species, had become its greatest weakness. Admiral Cho received reports of uprisings on over 50 worlds. Imperial fleets designed to maintain order were being destroyed by former subjects who fought with a desperate courage that reminded him uncomfortably of humans. The final insult came when human negotiators contacted the Imperial fleet directly. The transmission came from Admiral Kim Yeji, a human military leader who spoke flawless galactic standard and demonstrated a thorough understanding of Imperial military doctrine. Admiral Cho, she said with calm professionalism, we propose an immediate ceasefire and withdrawal of Imperial forces from Earth space. In return, we will halt our support for liberation movements in Imperial territory. The audacity was breathtaking. A primitive species that should have been conquered within months was now dictating terms to the most powerful military force in galactic history. And if we refuse? Admiral Cho asked. Admiral Kim's smile was cold and confident. Then we continue teaching your former subjects how to free themselves. We have learned much about Imperial military organization over the past 2 years. We know where your supply bases are located, how your command structure operates, and most importantly, how to turn your own tactics against you. Admiral Cho looked around his damaged bridge, at his exhausted crew, at the tactical displays showing human ships growing stronger while Imperial forces grew weaker. For the first time in Imperial history, a conquest had failed completely. The emergency recall message reached Dr. Kang Min-soo as he watched human ships appear on the edge of the Imperial home system through his telescope. After 3 years of exile on a forgotten research station, the Empire finally wanted to hear what he had to say. But now it was far too late for warnings. The transport that brought him back to the Imperial capital moved through space filled with refugee ships fleeing the outer territories. Entire star systems were in rebellion, using human-designed weapons and human tactics to throw off Imperial rule. The mighty galactic dominion was collapsing from within, torn apart by the very species it had dismissed as primitive. When Min-soo arrived at the Imperial Citadel, he found chaos where once there had been perfect order. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the building. Military officers ran through corridors carrying urgent reports. The confidence and arrogance that had defined Imperial leadership for centuries had been replaced by barely controlled panic. Counselor Park Ji-won, who had dismissed Min-soo's research 3 years earlier, now sat trembling in the emergency command center. His 4 eyes were wide with fear as he stared at tactical displays showing human fleets approaching from multiple directions. The beings who had ruled 200 worlds now faced the possibility of becoming extinct themselves. Dr. Kang, Park's voice cracked as he spoke. Your analysis of human behavior patterns. We need immediate solutions. How do we stop them? Min-soo looked at the strategic displays surrounding the command center. Human ships moved through Imperial space with surgical precision, their formations perfect, their tactics flawless. They had learned everything the Empire knew about warfare and improved upon it. What he saw was not an invasion. It was a demonstration of absolute mastery. There are no solutions, Min-soo said quietly. You did not just attack them, Counselor. You educated them. Every battle taught them something new about galactic warfare, about Imperial technology, about how to organize and coordinate on an interstellar scale. Dr. Lee So-young, now serving as Imperial Strategic Advisor in a desperate attempt to find answers, approached with the latest intelligence reports. Her face was pale with exhaustion and fear. She had spent 3 years watching her mentor's predictions come true in the most terrible way possible. "Professor," she said, "the humans have contacted all 200 species in our former empire. They are not demanding tribute or submission. They are offering something we never gave them, freedom to choose their own future." The irony was devastating. The empire had conquered through force and fear, ruling subject species through military might and economic dependence. The humans were liberating those same species by offering them what the empire had never understood: respect for their independence and genuine cooperation between equals. A communication alert sounded throughout the command center. The transmission came directly from the human fleet now surrounding the Imperial homeworld. Admiral Kim Yeji appeared on the main display, her uniform crisp and professional, her manner calm and confident. "To the Imperial Council," she began, speaking perfect galactic standard, "I am Admiral Kim Yeji of the United Earth Forces. We offer you the same choice you once gave us: surrender or face destruction. You have 24 hours to respond." The silence in the command center was absolute. For the first time in Imperial history, their homeworld was under threat from an enemy force. The tables had turned completely. The hunters had become the prey. Counselor Park turned to Minsu with desperate hope in his eyes. "Dr. Kang, surely there must be some way to negotiate, some weakness we can exploit. You understand them better than anyone." Minsu shook his head slowly. "I understand them well enough to know that negotiation is pointless. The humans have spent 3 years learning everything about us: our technology, our politics, our military organization, our economic systems. They know our weaknesses better than we do." The truth was even worse than Counselor Park feared. The humans had not just defeated the Imperial military, they had made it irrelevant. By liberating Imperial subject species and offering them genuine partnership instead of conquest, the humans had eliminated the Empire's foundation of power. Dr. Lee So-young brought the final intelligence report that sealed the Empire's fate. "Sir, our remaining loyal worlds are requesting permission to negotiate separate peace agreements with the humans. They fear that continued resistance will result in their complete destruction." The Galactic Dominion was dissolving before their eyes. Species that had served the Empire for centuries were abandoning it in favor of human promises of freedom and cooperation. The Empire's greatest achievements, its vast size and diverse membership, had become the weapons of its destruction as evacuation alarms began sounding throughout the Citadel. Minsu delivered his final assessment to the assembled Imperial leadership. "I warned you to leave them alone. Humans do not just fight wars, they evolve through them. They have spent 3 years learning everything about galactic civilization, and now they are reshaping it according to their own values." The Imperial surrender came 18 hours later, transmitted by Counselor Park himself, in a voice heavy with defeat and shame. The Galactic Dominion, which had ruled 200 worlds for over 1,000 years, ceased to exist with a single communication. In the aftermath, as former Imperial species celebrated their liberation and began forming new alliances based on cooperation rather than conquest, Minsu met with Admiral Kim Yeji aboard her flagship. She had requested the meeting personally, wanting to understand the Empire's greatest mistake. "Your research warned them about us," she said, reviewing his original reports on human psychology and adaptation patterns. "It warned them to leave." "You alone," Minsu replied. "They chose not to listen because they believed superior technology guaranteed victory." Admiral Kim nodded thoughtfully. "They learned the hardest lesson in galactic politics. Never underestimate a species that treats survival as a learning experience." The age of the Galactic Dominion was over. The age of human-led cooperation had begun.